everyone. You are still hanging out with Urban Interests. Listen, this is some concerning times right about now, especially when it comes to our history. We're trying to be erased in every facet. Voting suppressions and tactics and just a lot that's going on, and it drops with the melanated people. We are the ones that are impacted and affected by it the most. And so our good friend Michael Imhotep is here with us. He's been with us before. He's a radio show, talk show host. He is a historian. He brings the thunder. So you be ready, for this conversation. Hey, Mr. Michael, how are you?
All right, Angela, how you doing today?
I'm good. Listen, your name has significant roots in our history. It's a very powerful name. Tell us a little bit about it before we get into the conversation, just in case our audience may be just being introduced to you.
Okay, well, Imhotep in the Medu Neter language, ancient language of the ancient Egyptians, means he who comes in peace. And it's spelled Imhotep. And Imhotep was also a person. He was one of the greatest people in human history. He was an architect. He was the architect of the Step Pyramid for Nasubiti or Pharaoh Zoser in the Third Dynasty. He was a mathematician, a philosopher. He's known as the father of medicine. So he was also elevated to the status of a deity as well, or a neter. So Imhotep in the 2001, I think it was, movie The Mummy Returns, they depicted him as a villain. They had the actor Arnold Vosloo, who was an Arab Eurasian looking actor and portrayed Imhotep. So many of our children think that one of our greatest people in human history and one of our greatest ancestors was a villain, but he was not. Okay, so this is why, we have to correct the history and protect the history.
Now, you really, thank you for sharing that information. We always, know in our hearts that we have to continue to tell our stories from our perspective. And I know it's been an interesting time for you in the last year. So what has been the significant discovery or revelation that you've come across as it relates to our history?
The most significant discovery.
I mean, everything is significant. Everything's significant, because I know you stay on it. But what has happened in this last year? Been locked down and all of that.
The last year. I'm not sure the most significant discovery. I know, for instance, was it October 2021? Actually right around October 12th for Columbus Day, or what some Europeans call Columbus Day, I interviewed Dr. David Imhotep, author of the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. And we talked about his new book, The First Americans Were Africans, Revised and Expanded. And his book documents the fact that African people were here in this land we call the United States of America, going back at least 51,700 years ago, in the area that today we call South Carolina. There was a discovery made by Dr. Albert Goodyear, who's an archaeologist at the University of South Carolina, in 2004. And they discovered 13 different types of evidence thoroughly documenting an African presence in this country going back at least 51,700 years ago. They found artifacts, architectures, campsites, carvings, Egyptian writings, M174D haploid groups dealing with DNA and genetics. They found skulls, structures, skeletons, tools. And these were the Khoisan. The Khoisan are the short-statured Africans. They have the oldest DNA on the planet. They're the ancestors to the Ainu and the Twa. They come from Southern Africa. They go all around the world, and they were here as well. So when his two books are phenomenal. The first one's out of print. The second one is available at Amazon.com. The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, Expanded and Revised. And even though so I'm not saying the transatlantic slave trade did not happen. I'm saying we have to understand thousands of years of history that existed before the transatlantic slave trade happens and leads up to the transatlantic slave trade happening. And we also have to understand the African presence of the Africans known as the Moors in Europe, as well as in this land. And we know the Moors going to the Iberian Peninsula in 711 AD, General Tariq ibn Ziyad, it's what today we call Spain and Portugal. At that time, it was the Iberian Peninsula in 711 AD. They conquered the Vandals and the Visigoths, and they're going to settle in the southern portion of what we call Spain. And they're going to go all throughout Europe and to various degrees Africanize Europe. And the Moors are taking the teachings from the Nile Valley region of Africa, especially ancient Kemet. They're taking these teachings into Europe, the mathematics, the science, the algebra, the nautical instruments, musical instruments, new types of food. They're taking all this into Europe, and this brings Europe out of the Dark Ages. And we're going to see how different events lead to the transatlantic slave trade happening, and everything we taught Europeans came back to kick us in the behind, which is why I say I wish we'd never taught them.
You know, what you just said, I think you answered the question that I was going to ask you is, you know, we are inventors, creators. There's facts about this. Yes. You just gave us factual information. People can go look it up. Mm-hmm. We are not beastie. We are not inhumane. We are human beings with creativity, thought thinking, thought processing. Right. So talk a little bit and explain CRT, because this leads into that. Right. As people are stripping books out of school, right, and they are setting up rules and process procedures and laws that you can't teach this and you can't teach that because it might mess up the minds of the Caucasian students and community. So speak on that.
Well, critical race theory is a legal analysis coming out of Harvard University, developing in the late 1960s, coming out of the civil rights movement. And it's a legal analysis to understand how laws and policies continue to oppress African Americans, understanding racism as a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. And it is not something that's anti-American. It's not teaching people to hate white people. It's not something to make white children feel guilty. Critical race theory is taught at the is taught in law schools. It's taught in the graduate college level. Okay, mainly, maybe taught a little bit at the undergraduate level, but it's not something basically taught in K through 12. All right. So what's happened is this really goes back to Donald Trump. September 2020, there was an executive memo that Donald Trump did banning critical race theory being taught in training dealing with federal employees, September 2020. There's a good, I teach about this, and I teach two 10-week online history classes on the weekends, but also on my shows, on my radio show, the African History Network show, I deal with some of the origins of this attack on critical race theory. So, because critical race theory has been around for 40 years. It just started being attacked in the last year and a half or so. Okay. So then you had this right-wing guy, I think it was Christopher Rufo, I think is his last name, March of 2021. He did a tweet that talked about how what they wanted to do, the goal of the GOP was to take everything that they disliked about conversations about race, racism, white supremacy, slavery, things like this, and put it all under the umbrella of critical race theory. What Republicans have done, because they're better at messaging, and this is why we have to understand history, and I have a background in marketing, so I see this stuff coming before it happens. What Republicans have done with the help of Fox News, they've rebranded what critical race theory is. And I was saying early on, the architects of critical race theory, like Kimberly Crenshaw and others, and those that teach it, you cannot allow your opponent to reframe the conversation, to redefine terms, things like this. This is what's happened. So what Republicans have done is they've refashioned critical race theory into anything they don't like about conversations about race, racism, slavery, et cetera. And now in Republican-dominated state legislatures, they've gone and started passing laws, whether it's Georgia, whether it's Alabama, Oklahoma, things like this. They started passing laws saying that to varying degrees that critical race theory cannot be taught in schools, in K through 12 schools, things like this. A lot of these laws are very ambiguous, which causes a lot of fear among teachers because they're not certain about what they can teach and what they can't teach, and they don't want to lose their jobs. They don't want to be sued, things like this. This is a cultural war that Republicans are waging. Okay, and we really have to understand this and be smarter than this. And you always have to control the narrative. Okay, so this is one of the reasons why elections are so important, especially at the state level. Okay, because it's the state legislatures dominated by Republicans and Republican governors that are signing these bills into law. So when you look at in June of right around June 17th, 2021, when the Juneteenth bill passed the House and then passed the Senate and was signed into law by President Joe Biden, there were 14 Republicans in the House of Representatives who voted against the Juneteenth bill. Okay, and one of those Republicans was talking about critical race theory. Okay, it was I think it was McClintock, Representative Tom McClintock. He said, I don't think it is a healthy thing to reach into the dead past, revive its most malignant conflicts, and reintroduce them today in our age. Emancipation should be celebrated by honoring the person responsible for it, Abraham Lincoln, as we once did. But if you look at some others, they mention critical race theory, and I'm looking for the exact quote. I'll find it here. Yeah, critical race theory. This was, but this was one of some of the ones who. Representative Matthew Rosendale. He said the establishment of Juneteenth was part of a broader effort by liberals to make critical race theory the reigning ideology of our country. So he's from Montana. Representative Matthew M. Rosendale, Republican from Montana. He's one of the 14 Republicans who voted against this bill. So we have to control the narrative, okay? And this is this whole time here, this is reminiscent of the Reconstruction era and the political violence that helped to bring about an end of Reconstruction, which is 1865 to 1877. So yeah, this is in some ways, this is even worse than Reconstruction because you ain't have a Fox News during Reconstruction. Okay, you ain't have a president during Reconstruction. You know, Ulysses S. Grant was the president, was a Republican. You didn't have a Republican president inciting an insurrection during Reconstruction. Okay, so in some ways, this is even worse than Reconstruction.
You know, I will definitely agree with you, and it is so heartbreaking and it is so frustrating because the truth is right in our faces. Number one, it's right there.
Yep.
Number two, when the election, when Trump lost, Republicans told us what they were going to do. They said it. And I guess we didn't believe it because they went into action right away. And if you look at
some Republicans went into action right away, and then we see what's coming out with the January 6th committee, these hearings, and how detailed and how methodical the effort was to try to invalidate 81 million votes, including about 16 million votes for African Americans, because Joe Biden got 61% of his 81 million votes came from white voters, 20% came from African American voters. So yeah, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
So Michael, here's my this is in my mind, and I'm asking the question because I think that we were presented with a lot when they, doing the impeachment trial. I thought that it was a clear.
Which impeachment trial? There were two.
The last one. The last one.
All right.
Where there was some very compelling evidence. And even with this, the evidence is compelling. However, there has been some news media that has, and Republicans have said, and not only Republicans, but people in general, I don't care what you come out with, what you are presenting. The minds are made up. This is their person. You're trying to replace us, and we're going to roll with him to the end. And if we have to tear up America to make sure that we reign supreme and still remain supreme, then that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, so you're dealing with the great replacement theory. You're dealing with, so what we have here, this is what Trump preyed on. P-R-E-Y. This is what he preyed on, because he doesn't pray, but this is what he preyed on. P-R-E-Y.
What is it? Let me stop messing.
2 Corinthians. But this is what he preyed on in the 2016 presidential election. And I warned people on my radio show and the other platforms I'm on, I warned people over and over and over again during the 2016 election that we had to stop Trump, because I saw what was coming. Donald Trump was a backlash to 2 terms of President Barack Obama. And he's a throwback to Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon won the presidency in 1968 on the platform of law and order. That was Richard Nixon's platform, law and order. Richard Nixon was a backlash to the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, to the rebellions taking place across the country, like in 1967 here in Detroit, things like this, affirmative action, et cetera. Richard Nixon was a backlash to all of that. Anytime you have periods of time where there's perceived progress by African Americans, there's always a backlash to that. This is what the end of Reconstruction was in 1877 with the Compromise of 1877 and Rutherford B. Hayes becoming president and agreeing to the deal he struck with the Democrats, and he agreed to remove the remaining Union troops out of the South who were protecting the rights to a certain extent of African Americans, which allowed the white supremacists to take back full control of the state legislatures and all forms of government in those states. So there's always a period of backlash, and Donald Trump was that backlash to 2 terms of President Barack Obama. And when he talked about Mexicans being rapists and murderers and things like this, he's preying into the fear of the browning of America that many white people have. Not all white people, but a lot of white people, especially Republicans, fear the browning of America. And we saw the 2020 census results where the percentage of white people in this country dropped below 60% for the first time since 1790 when the first census was taken. It dropped to 57%. And some white people have a fear that by the year 2043, they would no longer be the majority population in this country. So Trump and other Republicans, and especially Fox News, they are preying on this, okay? But what a lot of white people don't realize is the same way that poor white people were being manipulated during the Civil War, and the majority of the white men who fought on behalf of the South during the Civil War didn't own slaves, and they were being manipulated by the 1% or the 10% of the wealthy white people in the South who own slaves, things like this, and they're going risking their lives. The majority of the people who fought, on behalf of the South during the Civil War were not the wealthy plantation owners, even though you did have some, like General Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis, things like this. Majority of them were poor white men who didn't own slaves, but they're risking their lives trying to fight for something they didn't have. Because when you read the statements of secession from states like Texas and Mississippi, things like this, they talked about how slavery was essential to their way of life, to their wealth, etc. Okay, so you have white people today, poor white people, who keep voting for these Republicans that don't care about them, who support Donald Trump, who could care less about these people. And he has shown it time and time again, trying to take away health care from them, all different types of things like this. They keep supporting them because they buy into this concept of whiteness. They buy into this concept of whiteness, which was really introduced about 1681 into the British colonies, here, what we call the 13 colonies, after what was known as Bacon's Rebellion in the colony of Virginia, 1675, 1676. This was a rebellion.
Historian.
This was a rebellion
yes.
of enslaved Africans and white indentured servants fighting. They united, fighting against a common oppressor. They were being manipulated by the same people. Okay, it's the same thing today. But a lot of these people that keep voting for Republicans are too ignorant to realize this. Okay, so it's going to be about 1681 that the term white is going to be really introduced into the colonies to unify white people, to break up the alliance between white indentured servants and enslaved Africans and put them on the white team. Okay. And because prior to that, if you read like chapter 2 of Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett Jr., he talks about how early in the history of the colonies, going back to 1607 in Virginia, the who we call white people, they were referred to as Englishmen or Christians, things like this. They really weren't called white. Okay. That's going to be introduced after Bacon's Rebellion. So we really have to understand this history. You know, what you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. And the reason why for African people, reason why our history is so important is, as two of my teachers, Dr. Leonard Jeffries and Professor James Small, correctly teach us, our foundation is African history and culture. It gives us our values, our interests, and our principles, our VIPs. This gives us a cultural paradigm that we see reality through. It influences our economic empowerment and political empowerment. And we have to understand that politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. So politics impacts every aspect of our lives. Right. And if we look at what's going on right now with ramping up midterm elections, we see Republicans using culture wars. They don't have policies to deal with inflation. They don't have policies to deal with the baby formula shortage. They don't have a better health care plan. None of that. They're focused on culture wars. They're focused on transgender athletes. They're focused on critical race theory. They're focused on things that are not going to make our lives better, but are going to make our lives worse. Okay, this is what they're dealing with. So we have to be smarter than this.
Wow, thank you so much. We're not done talking to you because we know that white media leads the public in continuing to have this propaganda campaign of misinformation out there. And we have persons like yourself, and we have other like Dr. Jeffrey Robinson. We've had a plethora of brilliant men, experts in African-American history, breaking it down just like you have done. And yet there seems to be a mental stagnation of what we need to do. We saw what happened when we came together and we changed what happened with the presidency, which tipped them off. So now voter suppression. So in my mind, if someone's trying to stop me from doing something that was successful before, that should tell us to come on now, continue the cohesiveness. Why are we not getting this, Michael?
Well, because we don't understand history, law, and politics. This is why. So you talk about the 2020 presidential election, 81 million Americans, including 20% is about 16 million, maybe 16.9 million African Americans voted for Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, rightfully so. Okay. We were born we may have been born at night, but not last night. So what we see here, the backlash that we see from many Republicans, is that one, you also had the Senate race in Georgia, January 5th Senate race, 2021. Reverend Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff defeat the two Republican sitting senators, Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue. And this gave control, a slim margin in the Senate for Democrats, 50-50 slim majority. So you had backlash because Donald Trump is a sore loser. He's a con man. He's a fraud. So he perpetuated the big lie even before the election took place. He said, if we lose, it's going to be because it's stolen. Okay. Then he comes out the night of the election, and there's still counting votes, and he declares that he won. Okay. No, he didn't. All right. And we see all this coming out in January 6th hearing. So you had Trump and his allies who raised $250 million in about 2 months, saying that they're going to file these lawsuits in court in all these states and fight the election results. They said it was stolen. This is the big lie. They raised $250 million from these ignorant people, okay, who don't understand the U.S. Constitution, don't understand any of this. And a lot of this was and he targeted cities that had high African-American populations and said the votes were fraudulent. Detroit, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Milwaukee, okay? He purposely targeted those to gin up the white supremacy and some of his followers, okay, and say, oh, those votes were illegal. We have to focus on that, all right? So, and then when you look at Georgia is so critical because you got to understand the history of Georgia. Georgia is a former Confederate state. Once again, Georgia is the state that has the largest Confederate monument anywhere in this country. It's called Stone Mountain in Georgia. Yeah. It's a huge mountain, and on the side of the mountain, carved into it, are the images of General Robert E. Lee, Thomas Stonewall Jackson, I think it is, and Jefferson Davis. Jefferson Davis was the president of the Confederacy. So in 1963 in Georgia, there was a segregationist member of the state legislature named Denmark Groover. Denmark Groover pushed a bill, and he championed this bill to have statewide runoff elections in Georgia. This is why you have statewide runoff elections in Georgia right now. It was specifically designed to keep African Americans from winning statewide elections. It stated that if no one in the primary got 50% or more than 50% of the vote, you had to go to a runoff election between the two top vote getters. The reason why they did this was because if African Americans in the primary put all their votes behind one candidate, okay, they could defeat a white candidate. So this was designed to give white candidates a do-over and come back, and all white people could coalesce their votes around one candidate in the general, or one white candidate in the general election. This is why that law was put in place. Reverend Raphael Warnock, with the help of Stacey Abrams, Insay Ufa, New Georgia Project, things like this, they beat the system. Reverend Raphael Warnock was never supposed to win a statewide election because of that 1963 bill, because of that 1963 law, okay? This infuriated Republicans, especially a lot of white Republicans in Georgia, because that was never supposed to happen, all right? So then you had the January 6th insurrection, fueled by white supremacy, especially targeting African Americans, things like this, and Latinos who voted, Asian Americans who voted. And all this is reminiscent of the political violence that we saw during the Reconstruction Era. When we talk about the Vicksburg Massacre, 1874 in Vicksburg, Mississippi, Clinton, Mississippi riot, 1875, the Eufaula Massacre and the Eufaula riot in 1874 in Alabama. And we're going to see these paramilitary groups, and I'm going to wrap up with this. We're going to see these paramilitary groups, the White League, the Red Shirts, the Ku Klux Klan, who were an arm of the Democratic Party at this time during Reconstruction, targeting African Americans. Today, they're the Oath Keepers. They're the Patriot Front. 31 of them just got arrested in Idaho because
just got released.
Well, they released on bail. No, they released on bail. They're released on bail. They're being charged with a misdemeanor charge, but they were released on bail. Okay.
And someone bailed them out. Mm-hmm. There was one person that bailed them out. I don't know how much money, but that says a lot.
Well, yeah. I mean, the groups like that have attorneys and things like that. So they're going to bail them out. They're going to be charged. They're going to be prosecuted. They'll most likely be convicted as well. But you have the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, the Patriot Front, different things like this, who are an arm of at least a faction of the Republican Party to do the same thing today that those paramilitary groups were doing during the Reconstruction Era.
So, Michael,
yes.
Real quick, I want to ask you real quick. So it really would, because I hear about the Reconstruction Era when we're talking about this critical race theory, how these groups came about. So it really would do us good to go and read about that time in history of Reconstruction, would you say? So that we can understand at least understand more of the dynamics that are playing out today, because that was critical, that point in time in history.
Absolutely. So when I teach about Juneteenth, I connect Juneteenth, June 19th, 1865. I connect that to the Civil War, the history of slavery in this country, but then the Reconstruction Era, which is 1865 to 1877, where African-American men are getting elected to public office. You had about 2,000 African-American men who get elected to office. You have African-American senators like Hiram Rhodes Revels from U.S. Senator from Mississippi, 1870. We're acquiring land. There are advances that we're making. You have the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, which gives us citizenship, the 15th Amendment, which gives us guarantees voting rights for African-American men. You have court cases that we're winning, and you're going to have a declining commitment from the Republican Party to keep intervening on behalf of African Americans. You're going to have the U.S. Supreme Court ruling against us in certain court cases as well. You're going to have these paramilitary groups that are trying to intimidate African Americans and keep us from the voting polls, just like today. All right. So I actually teach 2 10-week online history classes on the weekends. On Sunday, I teach from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. And it's a visual class that I teach. And we start in 1803 with the Louisiana Purchase and the Haitian Revolution, because those two events are related. And we go throughout history chronologically to the Civil War, Reconstruction, Jim Crow era, World War I, World War II, Great Migration, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power movement, to see how all that history is connected, the laws and policies put in place to put us right where we are today, to understand where we need to go from here. So reconstruct, when we talk about, when we have these celebrations of Juneteenth, this is not just about barbecue and watermelon. We have to deal with teaching history, teaching politics, economic empowerment, and teaching about law. All that comes together. And Juneteenth is connected to reparations, because Representative Sheila Jackson Lee was the sponsor of the Juneteenth bill that got signed into law. And she's also the sponsor of HR 40 as well. So all this history is connected. We have to use the Juneteenth celebration as a time to come together to educate our people, mobilize our people, organize our people, and teach this history also. And my website is theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. You can go there, register for the online course. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded, so you can watch it anytime also. But Reconstruction is a period of history. There's an article from Time Magazine, time.com, that deals with how 45 out of 50 states are not teaching the history of Reconstruction correctly, or not teaching it at all in K through 12 schools, okay? And this is, the history of Reconstruction is directly related to the racism we see today, to the voter suppression we see today, things like this. So we definitely have to study that period of history. All
right. Thank you, sir, for stopping by to talk with us. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, is there an email that you have? Sure. And also tell us about how we can tune into your radio show.
Okay, absolutely. Number one, visit our new website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. My DVD lectures are there, digital downloads, articles that I've written as well. And also where I'll be speaking is there also. You can email me, ahnshow@africanhistorynetwork.com, ahnshow@africanhistorynetwork.com, because we still have our old website, which is africanhistorynetwork.com. You can call me 313-462-0003. 313-462-0003. If you want me to do a presentation, or if you want to take one of my classes, anything like that. And I'll be speaking this weekend, June 18th. I'm speaking out in Mount Clemens Carnes Community Center for their Juneteenth celebration. And then also I'm speaking at in Inkster, Michigan, Inkster on Sunday at St. Clement's Church for their Juneteenth celebration as well. We have this information at our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. Just click on upcoming events. And then also Wednesday, June 15th, I'm at Nandy's Knowledge Cafe for a screening of the documentary Heavy is the Crown, with and director Amadeus Christ will be there. It deals with the African origins of the major religions. So it's a fantastic documentary featuring two of my teachers, Professor James Small and Professor Kaba Kamane. So that's taking place 7 p.m. at Nandy's Knowledge Cafe. We have information at our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, about that as well.
Thank you so much. And we just want to say too, yes, Juneteenth is a time of celebration. It's a time to educate, but not just only during this time. We need to be educated and researching our history all the time, because we are Black. 365 days out the year.
And keep in mind, June 1st, June 1st, 2021, the 100th commemoration of the Tulsa Race Massacre, and President Biden did the proclamation to make June 1st a National Day of Remembrance. So we have June 1st, National Day of Remembrance, Tulsa Race Massacre, June 19th, federal holiday for Juneteenth. That all takes place within the month of June, which is Black Music Month as well.
Yes,
this is a powerful month.
Yes,
this is a powerful month.
But I don't think, seriously, I don't think that we really know that. I think, in my own personal opinion, we focus on the celebrations and the festivities and the family stuff, and that's fine. That's good. But you are right. This is a powerful month, and we need to take full advantage of it.
And a month to celebrate, and a month to support Black-owned businesses as well.
Yeah,
a month to support Black-owned businesses also. Absolutely.
So let's not, we're coming out of the pandemic, and I want to get out, and the sun is shining, and it's hot outside, but we cannot sleep. We have to stay woke on this, and we have to stay involved and engaged, because along this platform all across the United States of America, some people are losing seats right now. I'm getting dings on my phone about races in Texas and races over here and over there, where a certain party is putting their pegs in place to take us backwards, and we cannot sleep.
They're trying to take us back to 1890 in the Mississippi State Convention, where they rewrote the Mississippi State Constitution to impose poll taxes and literacy tests. And this became known as the Mississippi Plan, which was copied by other former Confederate states: South Carolina, 1895, Louisiana, 1898, Alabama, 1901. And this was specifically designed to target African Americans, to suppress the African American vote. So with poll taxes, you had to pay a tax to be able to register to vote, maybe $2, $2.50, something like that. And what happened was, the African Americans that we had in elected office, they got voted out of office over a period of time, over a period of years. They get voted out of office because we couldn't vote for them. Okay. And then you have the paramilitary groups attacking us and keeping us from the voter poll. The same play that they did, that Republicans did. Sorry, the same play that Democrats did in 1890. This is the same thing that Republicans are doing in state legislatures today. We have to understand this history and learn from what happened in the past, okay? Because we can't let that happen again. Now, this is why voting strategically is so important, and everything that we're fighting for is shaped by politics and law and who's in a political office. So this is why this is critical.
And here's the thing, I think critical, they hijacked that. They hijacked that one word.
Critical race theory.
They took the thing critical and they turned it into something negative. But when
they focused on race. They focused on race. That's what it is. Well,
when you say critical, that means it's something that's highly important.
Yeah, so what Republicans are afraid of is not critical. They are afraid of race. They focus, when you look at the attacks on critical race theory in various states, and is largely coming from these former Confederate states, they're focused on race. Most Republicans who are against critical race theory can't tell you what critical race theory is. True. They're focused on, they don't want to talk about slavery unless they can control the narrative. They don't want to deal with aspects of the civil rights movement. Book banning evolves from the attack on critical race theory. But look at the books they're banning. They want to ban books dealing with Ruby Bridges, books dealing with Dr. King, the civil rights movement, books dealing with slavery, things like this. Attacking LGBTQ books, that's part of it also. But they want to focus on race. Critical, that's not what they're afraid of. They're focused on conversations dealing with race, because if you deal with race, then you're going to deal with racism. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race, coming out of the ideology of European white supremacy. And then that deals with laws and policies. And then when you really understand how all this is connected, then you really understand why voting is so important, and they can't allow that to happen. Now, so this is why they create this boogeyman called critical race theory.
Yeah, I get it. I get what you're saying. But the everyday common person, because we're entrenched in this because of our professions. But if you talk to your neighbor or just the everyday common person who has no concept of this, don't know about it, hasn't read it, hasn't looked up anything, the word, and I know this because I talk to people, critical scares them. Critical. So
which people are these? Which people are these who are scared of the word critical?
Well, just, people in the particular area that I'm in, and it's not people of my color, of course, who, and then therefore they don't understand it, and then therefore they're just receiving only the information that's being fed through the media, through whatever, medium that they connect to as far as listening to and seeing. So that's why I brought that word in there, critical. Has been changed in the mindsets of some, I would say, everyday persons who may not get into this like we're into it. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. The name I was looking for was Christopher Rufo. He March 15, 2021, RUFO. Look him up. He's the Republican who really rebranded what critical race theory is to be what Republicans want it to be. RUFO, Christopher Rufo.
Okay. Well, listen, my friend, you are a wealth of information.
Oh,
Thank
thanks.
you so much. And we're going to come back and talk to you.
Okay.
I just love it. You put it out there. It's transparent. It is data. It's facts. People can go look it up. I know I gotta let you go, but give me 2 more minutes. Just
go ahead.
And what I wanted to ask you is that with all of the information that you're presenting and we can hear and the data is there, what makes African Americans or melanated people, minorities, our brown brothers and sisters think that when these changing of these laws and these procedures that impact us will not impact them because they're the same color as you and I?
So you're saying the way that white people think, or the way that
what I'm saying is that with all of the information that you have given us, and you can read other things, what would make a person of our color even vote for the other party, or people who don't have their best interests at heart? And it has been presented.
Sure. Okay. So one, lack of understanding of history, lack of understanding of politics and law. Okay, so you'll have Republicans who say, come off the Democratic plantation. They'll say you may have some. I heard some Black Trump supporters who want to quote excerpts of Malcolm X talking about Democrats, but don't look at the full speech, like the Battle of the Bullet, March 29th, 1964. But in that speech, Malcolm X talks about registering African Americans as independent voters. Okay, so what we don't do a systems analysis, and a lot of those African Americans who end up voting for Republicans don't do a systems analysis. And so you have people like a Candace Owens that say, Democrats and the Klan, things like this. Yeah, but you don't talk about Republicans conspiring with Democrats to end Reconstruction, the compromise of 1877. You don't talk about the Lily White movement in 1928 when Republicans ran Herbert Hoover as their candidate for president, and they implemented a Southern strategy to appeal to Southern segregationist Democrats in 5 former Confederate states to get these Democrats to vote for Herbert Hoover. And the Republicans started ignoring the needs and concerns of African Americans. They were ignoring the rise of the Ku Klux Klan, which became very powerful again in the 1920s. And this started what's known as the Lily White movement, which was a movement to push African Americans out of the Republican Party, which is why we started slowly going over to the Democratic Party. So you're dealing with people that don't understand history. They can't run that on me. When they come at me with that nonsense, they get stopped dead in their tracks. I know they're lying. I know they haven't studied the history. So I encourage people to go to blackpast.org. They have about 6,000 pages of history dealing with African Americans and African American history. Read June 28th, 1964. Read Malcolm X's By Any Means Necessary speech, where he lays out a 5-plank platform and announces the Organization of Afro-American Unity. And he talks about the importance of voting, and he talks about registering African Americans there as independent voters. Okay. Now today, if you register as a Democrat, I totally understand, because you got a white nationalist domestic terrorist party, the Republican Party. Okay. There was a party realignment that took place starting in 1928, and it completed in the late 1960s after President Johnson is reelected in 1964. He runs against Barry Goldwater, U.S. Senator from Arizona. Barry Goldwater's anti-civil rights. By 1960, 2/3 of African Americans had already switched over to the Democratic Party. Okay, we didn't see them as being perfect, but we saw their policies as being better for us than the Republican Party. Okay, and then a lot of the Southern segregationists in the Democratic Party left the Democratic Party like Strom Thurmond, and they went to the Republican Party, which is where they died and their children are today. So you can't quote Malcolm in 63 or 64 without understanding the context and what happened after he said what he said. You have to relate that to history and understand what's going on today.
All right. We can go on and on and on. I'm gonna let you go though.
Okay, no problem.
I know you got another one. So come back. You know I'm gonna have you back.
Yeah, just let me know anytime. Yeah.
All right, Mike. Love you much. Talk to
All right,
you.
Angela. All right, peace. Thank you.
All right. All right, everyone. We are gonna take a quick break. We're gonna wrap up. That was a dynamic conversation. A lot of education was in that conversation, hoping that you caught it. We just need to know what's going on. In order to know what's happening today, we must know our history.